You're listening to the podcast She Who Believes with your host, Vivian Bell. Great day and welcome back to the podcast She Who Believes. I am your host, Vivian Bell, and I am indeed She Who Believes. For those of you who may not know, this podcast started out from my love of the verse Luke 1 and verse 45. God was speaking to me about being blessed for believing him, right? And the purpose of this podcast is to not only help you or encourage you to believe God more, but this year we're talking about how to have greater faith, how to operate in the faith you've been given, but also how to walk out faith by living the life that God created you to live. That's faith. When God speaks to you, shows you something, he's put some things inside of you, and you make a decision to agree with him and walk those things out, that is the ultimate faith. I just believe that. We believe that here. And so we're going to give you some how-tos. This episode 3 of year 8, season 8, the title of today's episode is The Recycling. Now, some of you might have cringed because you're like, your spouses or parents or whomever get on you about recycling. Put the stuff in the recycling. Quit putting it in the garbage can. Make sure you take the recycling bin out at the right day of the week, right? So some of you might cringe about recycling, but today I want to tell you the recycling we're talking about is going to absolutely bless your soul. Now, I want to first give thanks to the places and the areas that have consistently and continues to support and follow the podcast, to listen to us, to show up on Spotify and all the other areas where this podcast is aired. And so we want to give thanks to those in the U.S., there's Germany, there's China, there's the U.K., there's India, there's Japan. And our cities that come in ranking from the top to the bottom is Florida. That's your girl's hometown, her home state. There's Washington, Virginia, Ohio, California, North Carolina, Texas, Oregon, Pennsylvania, New York, Georgia, Michigan, Arkansas, Illinois, Tennessee, and New Jersey. And we just thank y'all for being faithful and showing up for 8 seasons of this podcast. We do not take lightly that you continue to return to listen, that you set reminders, that you're following us on your different platforms. And if you are not, click the follow button. Click the follow button because you get all the stuff. You get an update every single time a episode airs. And then also when things are downloads, I might speak of a downloadable something in during the podcast time. When you're a follower, you get updated for all of that. So make sure you go ahead and hit follow. Now, today, what we're going to talk about when we're talking about the recycling, right? We're talking about our thoughts. We're talking about recycling moments of disappointment. And we are also going to talk about the recycling failed expectations and recycling pain. I know it sounds like a lot, and maybe some of those hit you and maybe all of those hit you. But that's what we're here for. We're going to do that because we do those things by faith, by believing that God is enough, that Jesus is enough. Yes, we have to do work. Like Jesus is enough, but Jesus gives us the choice and the decision to go to counseling or to get coaching or to surrender our hurt and pain to him, right? And so this week we're going to talk about how we can recycle all of these things in order for us to just grow personally, because us recycling these things is going to actually produce that personal growth through our faith, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is recycling our thoughts. We have to first understand our thoughts, right? We have to discuss what shapes our thoughts and our reality. So reality to some may not be the same as what's reality to others. I had an experience recently where someone shared something with me, and what they saw or what they to me, it wasn't reality. I didn't see what they saw. But because of how their mindset is set up, their perspective in life, their belief that a certain group of individuals are after them or a certain group of people don't like them, then their perspective about how that person speaks to them or what they say and how they look at them, they're perceiving everything that comes from us, from particular people as a negativity, a negative thing. But for me, that wasn't reality. But we have to recognize where our thoughts are being shaped from. And so it's easy to judge someone and say, hey, that's not reality, but you don't understand what shapes a person's thoughts. It's important that we identify negative thought patterns. If we are always thinking that someone is after us or going to harm us, or we don't have any friends or anything negative, those thought patterns create cycles. It creates cycles of actions and behavior and thoughts, and all those things drive you to who you are and how you live. It drives you to believe certain things that may not be true. So we've got to understand our thoughts. And then how we recycle our negative thoughts is we have to find techniques that will transform our negative thoughts into positive affirmations, or as I like to call them, declarations. So when I am battling with something, dealing with something, or a particular thought continues to come to my mind that I know that is not in alignment with God's thought about me or what I agree with, then I have to, I have what I call strategies or declarations, where I have found scriptures, because the Bible tells us that we are not ignorant of the enemy's devices, right? So that means we know exactly how he attacks us. He might bring it a different way, but ultimately we know what the end result is, what his purpose is, what he's coming for. So if I know that the enemy will try to come and discourage me, because if I'm down and depressed, my mouth is closed, that means he wants my praise. So instead of allowing him to get my praise, I start my day with praise. I will be purposeful every single day to give God praise. Now, that's something that we should do regularly or continuously, but when you're in a season when you are being attacked in that area, then you're going to make it your business to do it even the more. So we figure out techniques, and then we talk about just how our faith can reshape our mindset. You see, when my mindset is negative, or your mindset is negative, or anyone's mindset is negative, and we begin to think through the lens of faith, of believing God, of trusting God. So yes, this situation that I may be in might be a negative one, as in it doesn't look like what I wanted it to. And let's just pause here for a minute, because just because something doesn't always look the way you want it to, it doesn't mean it's not what God said it is. Because sometimes we have to walk through a certain situation before we get to the end of what we saw in the vision or what he spoke to us. Because see, had I not walked through certain seasons of my life, I would have believed that people were truly for me and about me and fighting for me, when they were actually fighting to get where they needed to get by holding on to my coattail. Or they were just in it to win it, because they thought, hey, you're doing something, so I better grasp onto what you're doing so I don't get left behind. I legitimately had a person say to me, and the person said it to me multiple times, and it was like, hey, I prayed to God that whatever he doing in your life, don't do it without me. Like, don't, and that might sound like real good, because at the moment it sounded really good. It sounded really good to me the first 2 or 3 times it was said. And the Holy Spirit was like, excuse me, pay attention. She is not saying that I'm cheering you on. I want the best for you. She's saying that I see something good in you, and I don't want God to do it without me. So I don't want you blessed if I'm not a part of it. I don't want to watch you get what you're getting if I'm not a part of it, if it's not somehow benefiting me. And at first I thought, well, maybe that's just like, where did that thought come from? Let me check it. And continuing in prayer, God started taking me back and revealing certain things about this person's character, about commitments they felt to keep. And it wasn't about the getting of something from that individual. It was about, you say something, you volunteer for something, you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, and then you in turn try to make me feel like I am too high in my thoughts about myself, and that's why you didn't do what you did. The reality is that you had other intentions. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention to the things that will properly shape our mindset and change negative thoughts. So what I shared that because I didn't realize that it was having a negative effect on my thoughts, because I didn't pay attention to the person's heart's intentions. I allowed what they did or didn't do, or their lack of actions, or their words that really came from a bad place, caused me to operate in a place where I looked at myself negatively, where I started to question my own heart, when I knew for a fact that I every day putting my heart before God. And not saying I'm perfect, I'm not saying that at all, but what they were trying to imply my intentions were not my intentions. And so I had to be careful of what negative thoughts and indictments that I agreed with and that I didn't agree with, that I rebuked and stated or did not refuse to come in agreement with. So we have to have techniques. Mine were declarations. Then the other ones was how faith can reshape our mindsets. But when I'm looking through the lens of faith, of believing God for his promises for me, I can walk through a season and it not look like what I thought it would. I can walk through a season of heartbreak. I can walk through a season of God just making my circle smaller. I can walk through a season of all the things and making decisions that nobody else understands, that looks ridiculous. As we talked earlier, it might seem like in reality to others, like this is foolish, this is dumb, there's no way that's God. But when I know that God has spoken to me and it is his voice that I've heard and he's confirmed it over and over again, then I'm recycling my thoughts through faith and letting faith reshape my mindset about me, about the word of God, about what this season really is and what it looks like. And then we need to be able to have maybe even other people in our lives that will share with us the things that they've walked through that helped them get out of their negative thought pattern. See, we can't get out of something until we've acknowledged that it exists, or we can't change a thing until we acknowledge it exists. We can't improve on a thing or a product until we recognize or acknowledge that, hey, this product did good for this season, but there's more this product can do. Or this product isn't doing what we said it would or what we thought it was going to do. So let's go back to the drawing board, revamp it. And even if that means you have to apologize to your constituents, to those who are your supporters and purchasing your products, do that. People prefer honesty over anything. I'm gonna tell y'all a quick story. I had no intentions of sharing this, but it goes back to the recycling of thoughts. So probably 2 years ago now, it was my first time collaborating with someone on something digital and like sharing an ebook and just giving so collaborators will come together and put together a digital giveaway, a digital tool set. People can log on and say, hey, I would like this tool set. And then they can choose whose product they want to take, if they want to be a part of a coaching program, all of those things, right? So I took part in it and I set out in a portion. I've done it twice. The second time it was amazing. I created a book out of it the first time. So the second time that book was what I used in my second collaboration. But in my first collaboration, I faltered in an area. Didn't intend to, didn't mean to. It just didn't play out the way that it was mapped out. Even though it was mapped out, the commitment was there, it didn't play out. So I had to say, hey, I can improve on this. I had to acknowledge to the 200 and some odd people and say, hey, my apologies. Here's what I'm going to do for you in return. But bigger than just owning it and being a person of integrity to say, hey, this didn't go down like I thought it would, I had to also recycle the thoughts about what happened. Because if I had stayed in the point of the place where there was failure, I would have never produced that mindset transformation handbook. And then I also would not have produced all the other mindset journal series that came from it. So what it taught me was so very much, but I could have stayed in that place where I shrunk and decided to stay in negative thoughts about myself. But instead, after a period of that, I had to filter that through faith and, okay, God, what is it that happened here? Show me what it is I can get out of this. What do you want me to be in this? How do you want me to respond in this? And then what is my next? Because we have to always know that there is a next. That's what's a part of the recycling. What's next? How can this be used differently and better? That's what's happening when we put those bottles in the recycling bin. Those things are supposed to go back and get recycled, melted down, whatever they do, and go through a process so they can be recycled into paper bags or plastic bags or other water bottles. Like there's a reusing of what was already used. So just because something was used and it feels like it has no more purpose, we can definitely recycle it, right? Next, we're going to talk about recycling moments of disappointment. So when we're facing disappointment, we have to remember that we have to truly face it. Because if we don't face disappointment, it can become doubt. It can become bitterness. It can become the thing that makes us sick. The Bible says hope deferred makes the heart sick. And what he's saying is when you are disappointed, when the hope that you had in something it didn't go the way you thought, and you're hoping for this and you're believing for this, and God, I'm standing on your word, and it didn't go down like that. not in the way my mindset saw it. My mind expected it to happen. Disappointment is real and it comes, but we have to find a way to recycle disappointment. How and recognize how it may be affecting our spiritual journey, right? That's where it starts. How is this affecting my faith? Am I still praying the same way? Am I still believing God? I might be praying a prayer of faith with no faith attached. Praying a prayer of faith with no faith attached. So I can pray something because it's supposed to be the right thing I'm supposed to say. And I think God expects me to say it, or those around me in unit who are in agreement with me, they expect me to keep believing God for this miracle and for this blessing. But yet my disappointment is what's fueling that. So now I'm performing as opposed to praying. What do you do with your disappointment? There's a transformative power in disappointment, because we can create strategies that will help us find lessons and opportunities in every disappointment. And we can turn to trusting God's plan during these challenging times. We can share and listen to and receive inspirational stories of how disappointment turned into growth for someone else. Because see, we're all connected in some way. And that's not by accident. It's a purposeful thing that God does. So the next thing we're going to talk about is recycling failed expectations. We define our expectations and then we can recycle them. So when we define what our expectations are or were, we're discussing how we've set them and how we've actually managed our expectations even through seasons of disappointment. We talk about how our expectations impact us when they have been unmet and how they impact our faith. When an expectation is not met, that brings about disappointment and often discouragement. But we can recycle these expectations by approaching it in a realigning manner, which means we are realigning our expectations with our faith and the promises that God made us. So, Lord, your word is sure, is true, and you never let it fall to the ground. It will always go and perform what you sent it for, because that's what you do, and you watch over to make sure that happens. So your word is still true. It's still sure. It didn't map out like I thought it would, so show me what's left. That's usually God's will. His will doesn't mean that he wanted you, that you didn't hear him clearly. It may mean that what you saw, you're going to see it in a different time frame or in a different place or region or area. But we have to be able to go back to faith. Go back to, what did I believe you for, and why did I believe you for it? Well, because you said it, and then you came and confirmed it, and you continue to confirm it. So that means that there is something more. Lord, show me how to align my thoughts, my life, and my expectations with your will. And that is how we recycle our expectations. Remember to remain open to God's plans, because his plans are so much greater. I was leaving church today and there was a young lady ahead of me, and God has been talking to me about exchanging his will for mine. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't in the will of God, but my will might be for something. I might be praying. God might say, pray this for your child. But my will in that situation might look like you marrying this person. But God's will is you not getting married at all for like 8 more years and then marrying this person. So we have to exchange our will for his. That doesn't mean the person I wanted my child to marry was awful or horrible or any of those things. It just means it wasn't God's will. So I can be able to lay down my will and not push my will in somebody's life, my child's life, a friend's life, whomever, because I want God's will greater than anything. So this is how we recycle and line up with God's will. And then our last thing, we're going to talk about recycling our pain. We have to first understand our pain, and we do that by acknowledging it. Acknowledging that, first of all, that pain is inevitable in life, but also that our pain can distance us from our faith. And to be cognizant of that and put strategies in place to help avoid that or to close the gap once that has taken place. Healing through recycling our pain. We process it by turning our pain into a tool for healing. So my pain was recycled through becoming a biblical counselor and a coach. I see that in the midst of this podcast. God came to me and said some years ago, or over a decade or so now, he said, you're going to be a counselor, you're going to be a biblical counselor, and you're going to be a marriage and family counselor. And my first thought was, literally my words were like, Jesus, we couldn't have done this before I got divorced. But that wasn't his plan. That wasn't his purpose. Because the reality is everyone does not stay in their marriage. And a lot of them start out the way I did. I never had any intentions to get divorced. I would get married. I was going to just ride it out like my parents, like my grandparents, like others around me. But life happened. And I am here to minister from the pain that I walked through to others who are walking through that same pain, whether it is as a single mom or someone who is divorced or a parent who's dealt with certain things with their children. But I needed to be able to recycle my pain so that others could learn to recycle their pain so they can maybe either teach people how to avoid the pain or that to show them that this pain has purpose and that it will be one of the biggest things to drive your faith and your faith walk and to not allow your pain to distance you from God and from operating and living in faith. And we do this also by healing through recycling our pain. We process it, we put tools in place, but we also pray in faith to overcome the pain. Sometimes the pain seems and feels so unbearable, and we feel like, I don't think I'm ever getting from this place of heartbreak or pain. But when we are recycling it back again through faith, and we do that through, Lord, I still believe you. Lord, I trust you. Lord, what did you say? Take me back to what you said. Take me back to your promise. Okay, now show me what that looks like for you, Lord God. And not that you didn't ask him that before, but ask him again, sweetie. Ask him again. This is not an indictment. This is a recovery. And then testimonials, again, as I stated before, from other individuals who've walked through it or becoming a testimony to others to teach them how to recycle their own pain. Now, remember that the recycling is a process. Just like if you recycle in a bottle, that's a process. There's a process in the recycling of our pain, our thoughts, our disappointment. Be kind to yourself as you walk through this process because God is walking you through it, walking with you through it, and he has not abandoned you or forgotten you. I want to encourage you to apply what we've discussed today, to sit down and really say, hey, what do I need to recycle in my thoughts? What do I need to recycle from moments of disappointment? What do I need to recycle from failed expectations? And what do I need to recycle from this pain? And then put those things before God. Maybe you got a whole list of things. Then, honey, take one thing at a time and take it to God. Don't think you're going to run out of time. When you are surrendered to God, honey, and you're in front of him, God said something to me through a Bible study the other day. He said, I'm too big for you to miss me. Quit fearing you're going to miss me. Quit fearing you're not going to know my will. You study my word. You understand it. You are building. You have a relationship with me and you continue to build a stronger relationship with me. I'm too big for you to miss. So put this before God. Find the places. Write it down. And then also engage with this podcast community. In any area, especially on Spotify, this podcast is set up for comments. You can put your comments there, like, where did this podcast touch you? Or, hey, I need a little bit more help. Hey, is there anybody else out there who listened to this podcast who's going through this? Build community. And recycle together so that we can remain she who believes, or he, because we do have some men who follow and support this ministry strong. They support this podcast. They support this business, which is all ministry. They support it. So whether you are she or he, work together to help others also be she and he who believes. I want to thank you guys for listening. I thank you for your time. I thank you in advance for your participation in the comments, and whether you're commenting on the podcast, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. I was going to say on TikTok, but they took us dark. I don't know if by the time you hear this recording, if we'll be back up. But either way, I thank y'all for y'all's support. And I look forward to next week's podcast with you. And until then, remember to trust God, to believe God, to focus on the things that matter, and that you indeed are loved and blessed. So be good to you, and we'll see you back here next week. God bless. You are listening to the podcast, She Who Believes. Thank you for joining us today. May your faith be counted unto you as righteousness.